Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is marvelous to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Samantha. I am a knitter, knitwear designer, and I guess podcaster is the word for it. I just do these videos on YouTube, but I live in the Arctic Circle of Norway in a place called Tromsø with my husband. And to beat the quite harsh cold that we have here for most of the year, I enjoy knitting. So I do a lot of videos on this channel. I do like a regular podcast series. I have like some special little videos about life in northern Norway and the knitting options up here. Like I did a little yarn store tour, and then I also do these little yarn reviews because I think they're a lot of fun, and I personally love just hearing about yarn, and I know a lot of you guys do too. So I haven't done one in a while, and I figured it was time to do another yarn review. So what we're doing today is reviewing Dropz Air, which is, I have quite a bit of it here. It's a really, really nice everyday wool and alpaca yarn. The sweater that I'm wearing is not knit in Dropz Air because it is a very, very warm yarn. And it's just a little bit too hot inside the house to wear something with Drops Nepal. I tried, and then I got overheated really fast. So I'll talk about it's a really good outdoor yarn, but I do not recommend it for warmer weather climates or if you're staying inside quite a bit. But I digress. So what I'm actually wearing is a sweater that is knit in this kind of chunky mohair. It's called, I don't know if it actually has a name. It's a sweater that Line Langmo, who is a Norwegian blogger, posted on her blog quite a while ago, and it became really popular in Norway. And so it's a pretty easy pattern. I found it and I made it myself. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing. But I'm going to be talking about Drops Nepal, which is a very, very different kind of yarn than the sweater that I'm wearing today. So Drops Nepal is one of my favorite kind of sturdy yarns to work with, actually. It is, it's quite robust. I'll try to It's really, really springy. It's really nice, and it has some fibers kind of loose around the thread, but it's not a very sheddy yarn. It's made up of 65% wool and 35% alpaca. So it is a really, really warm yarn that I have worked with for accessories, for sweaters. So I figure I've done enough projects now in Drops Nepal that I can kind of give you a pretty holistic view of the yarn itself. So Drops Nepal is actually a very budget-friendly yarn, which is why I started working with it in the first place, because I am here as a PhD student. I am not exactly rolling in bank. So when I first started knitting, I did not want to, or I could not, I guess is more accurate, I could not spend so much money on yarn. So I ended up going for things like Drops Nepal. And actually, it's pretty good bang for your buck. It's I think about $3.25 if you buy it in the US per skein, or about 21 norsk kroner in Norway. It's a little bit cheaper here because Drops is a Norwegian company. I'm guessing that's the reason why. It's just shipping costs and distributor costs maybe over in the States. That's why it's more expensive. But it is, you get quite a bit for it. You get 75 meters or 82 yards in a 50-gram skein. This is an aran-weight yarn, and I do have it in different colors, so I will alternate. This is the colorway 0612. It's a really, really nice chocolatey brown that I have in my stash to make a colorwork sweater. And then I also have this as a contrast color. This is color 0100. And I do have all the shade names here, so I can probably find what that is. So 0100 is the off-white. and the other one, this 0612, they call it medium brown. So this is the off-white. So yeah, it is, it's an aran-weight yarn. It is meant for use on 5mm needles, but I have used it from anywhere from 4mm needles all the way up to 7 when I hold it together with a strand of kid silk. And I'll get to that later, but it is made in Peru, is what this says. And it feels very, very nice and soft against your skin. I think it's really pleasant to work with. It knits up really nicely. It has really good stitch definition. It comes in a variety of different colors. This is colorway 8916, which is Bordeaux. It comes in some, like this is a unicolor, and it comes in some mixes and some unicolors, so you get some more heathered tones, you get some more unicolored tones. There's a pretty wide variety of colors. This is 0300, which is a beige. So you get a variety of different colorways in this yarn. It's very nice and soft. I think that's the alpaca that makes it feel really soft against your skin and also really warm. And the wool makes it kind of moisture wicking, so it's a good option for turgensers, as we call them in Norway, which are these outdoor hiking sweaters that, they don't have to be for hiking necessarily. They could also be for like camping trips. They could be for like those mountain getaways. I'm originally from Northern Virginia, so we have the Shenandoah right there in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and so it's pretty common to like get away for the weekend, just stay in a cute little B&B. It can get a bit drafty, so it's nice to have those hand knit sweaters to pull over just to snuggle in and be warm, and I think this is a great yarn to knit in for that. So yeah, moving on to kind of what I like about it, what I don't like about it, because this is a nice dense yarn. I've used it, like I said, in a variety of different projects. So I think at this point I have a good idea of things that work, things that don't work so well. The general structure of the yarn is, so Dropz has a wide variety of different structures. I've talked about Dropz Air before, which is one of my favorite yarns. It's a blow yarn. This one, on the other hand, is more, I think it's like a 2-ply, it feels like. But yeah, it's very nice. It's not splitty at all to knit with. It's not like it comes apart easily. It doesn't shed fiber so much. So yeah, it's nice. It's hard wearing, but it's also very soft and comfortable. So I've talked about drapey yarn in the past, which is a very, very rustic Icelandic yarn. Drops Nepal is, it's much softer than that, but it can be used for maybe not like a drapey substitution. In some cases it can be used. So like for the main body of a sweater, maybe it would be either Nepal or Dropz Lima, which is kind of a similar yarn but a bit thinner. Depending on what your gauge is, you could probably get away with that. So as I mentioned, Dropz Nepal is really, really good for tur sweaters or outdoor sweaters, especially ones that you can make on a budget, because a lot of outdoor sweaters will call for yarns like Samnesgarn Peer Gynt, which is a very, very nice, it's like a 100% wool yarn. It feels a little bit more rustic because it doesn't have that alpaca in it, but it's pretty hard wearing. And this is a good substitution for that. So you can usually, like I don't have it with me because it was a gift, but I made the very, very popular Riddari sweater for my husband's grandpa for Christmas one year in Dropz Nepal. And that was really, really nice and soft. It was a lovely colorwork yoke sweater that looked really nice with all the different color options that Dropz Nepal has. And I don't actually know how many colors there are, but like I will link to the website and you can go on there and you can see there's like, it looks like at least 40 different colors that you can choose from. So that is quite a bit. And then you can make your lovely turgensers with that yarn. And it also like, okay, so maybe this is a good example for that. This isn't just Dropz Nepal, but this is my Lyngen Pullover, which I made with one thread of Drops Nepal and then one strand of kid silk from a indie yarn company in Norway called Unique Garn, which does hand-dyed yarn. So they have hand-dyed mohair, and I figured I wanted to hold Drops Nepal with some hand-dyed mohair. And I knit this up on 6mm needles. This is one of my designs. And I wouldn't necessarily classify it as an outdoor sweater per se. It's just not a very traditional outdoor sweater. It doesn't have the standard color work. It's not really meant to be primarily worn outdoors, but I did wear it outdoors on its debut kind of wear, because I wanted to go skating on the ice lake at Védís in Lyngen in Norway. So yeah, I wore this on, it was like a 2-kilometer trek from the car to the lake, and this was like almost Mercatida, so it was in November in the Arctic Circle, and I wore it there, I wore it skating. I didn't even wear anything on top of it while I was skating, I just wore this with like an underlayer, like a woolen underwear, thermal base layer. And I had this, and I had the base layer, and we skated for like 2-3 hours, and it kept me extremely warm. And I didn't feel like I was overheating when I was ice skating, but I also felt really warm. So this is a really good yarn choice, I would say, for outdoor sweaters, especially when it's a bit drafty, when it's a bit cold. The other thing that Drops Nepal is really good for are cables. So this is the Arrakis pullover or Arrakis jumper by Knitwear by Joan. I test knit this for her, and I knit this in a strand of Drops Nepal and a strand of kid silk, Drops Kid Silk. And I really, really wish you guys could feel the difference, honestly, that like just needle size can make when you make these sweaters. Like this one is so heavy, it is so dense, because I knit it on 4.5mm needles with 2 strands of yarn held together, and this feels so much airier because I use 6mm needles. So I think when you're knitting in Drops Nepal, like if I was redoing this, I don't think I would have maybe added the extra mohair. I don't know if that maybe sized up the needle size or something. So Dropz Air can get a bit it'll feel armory if you knit it on too thin needles, and especially cables, because they really take in the fabric. So yeah, that's just one thing you have to watch out for, but otherwise it has really, really good cable definition. So those pop really well. It's just that you have to be prepared that cable sweaters knit in Drops Nepal are going to be very, very heavy. And I knit this little cable knit scarf for Kevin in Drops Nepal. In the shade, it's orange. It's one of the orangey fire red shades. This is actually one of my own designs. And this is a mix, like an orange mix. So yeah, this is just an example of like cables pop really, really well in this yarn. So I definitely recommend Drops Nepal for cable knits in particular. That is actually Drops Nepal just held by itself. So either way, if you hold it together by itself, if you hold it together with other yarns like a kid silk, or maybe if you're sensitive to kid silk mohair, then you could hold it with brushed alpaca or Surrey alpaca. I know a lot of yarn companies have Surrey alpaca follow threads kind of that you can hold with your main yarn. You could also hold it with something like compatible cashmere. Maybe then I wouldn't recommend it so much for an outdoor sweater because, yeah, I mean, cashmere and outdoor sweaters maybe don't mix perfectly. But yeah, you could definitely knit some really, really nice cables in Drops Nepal, and I would definitely recommend it for that. And then the other thing that I would recommend Drops Nepal for, like I mentioned, I knit the Riddari sweater in Drops Nepal, is color work. Just because Drops Nepal has such a wide range of colors, so it's just a really good choice for colorwork sweaters. But I will put a caveat on this. So colorwork, I think the Riddari sweater was a bit of a fluke for me, honestly. It worked out really, really well in Drops Nepal. I was a very new knitter when I made that sweater, so I didn't quite know about like the way that yarn wears over time, like gravity and how it affects the fit of a garment, and when you block and then you wear, like I didn't know any of that. I just steam blocked the sweater because I was still kind of afraid of wet blocking, and yeah, then I gave it to Kevin's grandpa, so I haven't really gotten to see how it's worn and how, I mean, I don't know, like multiple wears and multiple washes have affected it. But I did notice when I was testing my Maryland Heights sweater, which is one of my designs. It's a colorwork sweater with like 3 different contrast colors and then 1 main color. And it's knit with a circular yoke from the top down. And I recommended, and I really shouldn't have done this, I recommended Drops Nepal as a substitute yarn. Because I'd used it in circular colorwork in the past, and I thought, okay, this will be a good substitution for the yarn that I used. And unfortunately, one of my testers who knit her sweater in Drops Nepal, she found that it just grew so much after blocking and when she wore it, because the yarn was so dense that when you knit it in the circular yoke, like even though her swatch was good, because of the weight of the sweater, it just dragged it right down. So I think when I say it's good for colorwork sweaters, what it's really good for are like a certain construction of colorwork sweater. So I wouldn't really recommend circular yoke colorwork sweaters in Drops Nepal unless it's just like 1 or 2 colors that you're using. But I do think that drop shoulder sweaters are good in Drops Nepal. So if you're doing like a colorwork drop shoulder, so maybe, I mean, if you're gonna go nuts, something like the Lillehammer sweater, that's a drop shoulder, very classic Norwegian design. I think if you can meet gauge with Drops Nepal, that would be a great sweater to make with that. But yeah, be kind of wary about the circular yokes. It's just because of the way all that color, like that stranded color work on the yoke will just pull it down. But when you do a drop shoulder, it's like, it's okay if it pulls down a bit over the edges. You're kind of going for that more oversized, loose, kind of, I would call it like a boyfriend fit almost. So then it's fine. So I really, really recommend Drops Nepal for drop shoulder color work, but approach it with some caution when you do circular yoke. I think for circular yoke, I would be more willing to recommend a yarn like Dropz Lima, which is a slightly lighter yarn. It's about 100 meters per 50 grams. And I think that it's the same kind of composition. It's also a wool alpaca blend. It's just a bit thinner. So that is a good choice for circular yoke colorwork sweaters. And I've actually made a circular yoke colorwork sweater in Dropz Lima before. It's the Mountaineer sweater from the Novita Knits magazine. So I love that sweater. I wear it quite a lot, and it's super, super nice, super, super comfy. So yeah, I recommend choosing that maybe instead if you're on the fence and you really like the color selection of Drops Nepal. Maybe there's a pretty similar color selection in Lima, and yeah, just go for that instead and save yourself some heartache and make a less dense sweater. So what is Drops Nepal not good for? As I've mentioned, circular yoke colorwork sweaters, also lace work. So people who do lace knitting, you know that like your lace work needs to be really nice and delicate and light and breathy. Drops Nepal is a very dense yarn, so it's not really going to lend itself well to blocking open those lace knits, and it's just, I mean, it's a very, like, it is a hard-wearing yarn. It's not a very delicate, lacy, like, I want to put this in a feminine cardigan type of yarn. So I would steer clear of Drops Nepal for any of your lacy knits, unless maybe it's a very, very simple lace design. Like, I know that Drops has some free patterns on their website, and they do have some recommended lace patterns in Drops Nepal. What I would suggest doing for those instead of using Drops Nepal is maybe using 2 strands of a thinner yarn held together, like maybe Dropz Alpaca or Dropz Baby Merino, or holding like a strand of Dropz Baby Merino with a strand of Kid Silk. Any kind of combination of yarns that you can get instead of just using 1 strand of Dropz Mohair for lace knitting. Because it doesn't, even the way that the fabric just drapes on you, it doesn't really lend itself well to that light, airy, lacy fit that you really want to go for when you're doing your lace work. So yeah, do not use, this is just me. All of these are, I should have clarified this earlier. All of this is just my opinion. So if you think that Drops Nepal would look absolutely lovely in a lace knit, please go ahead. Don't take this as me putting down kind of like, no, this is bad. This is just what I think. I would not use Drops Nepal for a lace knit. And then I also wouldn't use it for something that's supposed to give you more of a drapey fabric. So yeah, I've used it for the sweaters I've shown you. I've used it together with a strand of kid silk in this vest. This is from a Norwegian knitwear designer, and I test knit this for her. So I just used a strand of Drops Nepal and a strand of kid silk, Drops Kid Silk together and made this. And this is a tighter vest. So I thought it would be fine to use Nepal and kid silk together for this. But what I have not ever tried to do is make like a drapey sweater with Drops Nepal. So something that, what's a good example of a drapey sweater? Like the skapelgenser, for example, that I have I've translated the pattern to English on my blog. But I'll put a picture up here so you can see what it looks like. It is a very, it's supposed to be this oversized kind of light sweater. So you knit it up using one strand of brushed alpaca, one strand of fingering weight alpaca on 7mm needles. So it is supposed to give you a very, if you hang it, I guess the way to explain drape really is you hang the sweater on a hanger, you hold it in one hand, and then you just kind of tap it a little bit with the other hand, and if it sways back and forth really easily, that is good drape. And if it stays very still, then it's a stiffer sweater. So Drops Nepal is really, really good for more structured sweaters because it holds its shape really nice and well in a knit garment. It is not so good as a drapey fabric. I would not recommend knitting it with a larger knitting needle just to get a drapier, airier fabric. It's much more, I don't know, it's probably easier to use maybe a different yarn with a different fiber composition, and that's a little bit less kind of springy, less dense. It's more kind of light, and to use that to get your achieved or your desired fabric characteristic as well, if you want it to be a little bit more airy and nice. But yeah, the main takeaway about Drops Nepal that I have for you is that it is extremely warm and it wears really well. So this is a hat that I made for Kevin. I actually wrote up the pattern earlier and he's kind of folded it funny. But yeah, this is a little hat that I made for him out of Drops Nepal, and he has worn this so much that it started pilling. So Drops Nepal does pill eventually, but it takes quite a bit. He has been wearing this for 2 years nonstop. And yeah, this is the amount of pilling, and we have a de-piller, we just need to use it. I knitted on 4mm needles, 1x1 rib, and it just keeps him so warm. He has worn this through negative 10, 15 degrees with wind. It's been and it still kept him really nice and warm. And I wore it actually, I borrowed it or stole it from him for a little bit when I was skating on Védís. And I am chronically cold, especially my ears. They get really, really cold, especially when it's windy. And it kept me warm too. So it's just a very, very warm yarn. Especially when you knit it as a more dense fabric, when you knit it on thinner needles, and when you hold it with a strand of kid silk. And also when you hold it with a strand of kid silk, I have worn this Lyngen Pullover so much, and it hasn't pilled at all. It still looks just like it did the day that I cast it off and blocked it. And that's, I think something that people have complained about in the past is that Drops Nepal maybe does pill a little bit in outdoor sweaters, like when you under the arms where it rubs against your body, or like in the back where it might be rubbing against your pack. So first of all, I would not recommend carrying a backpack right up against your sweater. I think that's just asking for pilling to happen. But as for the arms rubbing against the body, when you knit Drops Nepal together with another strand of yarn, like a kid silk mohair or a Surrey alpaca, you really minimize that from happening. So not only do you add extra warmth to your sweater, but you also reduce the risk of pilling and wear in your sweater. So I definitely recommend doing that. So yeah. That is all the Drops Nepal I had to show you today. And yeah, I'm just really curious to know if you have worked with this yarn before. What have you made with Drops Nepal? If you haven't tried it yet, and if you've been kind of on the fence, do you have any other questions about it? I would love to know. Leave me a comment below. And yeah, just I love hearing feedback from you guys. So yeah, feel free to drop in and say hi. And if you like yarn reviews in general, let me know. I make kind of a bunch of different types of videos, so it's always useful to know what you guys like to listen to and what you like to hear. And as always, if you want to come over and say hello outside of YouTube, you can find me over on Instagram and Ravelry and TikTok as the Strikketjik. And you can also find me over on my own website, thestrikketjik.com. Until next time, you guys, happy knitting! Bye!